The time period between the 1870s and the 1900s in American history is known as the Gilded Age. This time period is known as the Gilded Age, as Mark Twain called it, because America looked good on the outside, when in reality it was corrupt on the inside. This was a period of greed, capitalism, and shady business practices for business owners to gain higher profits. Factory workers during the Gilded Age were underpaid and overworked in harsh conditions, while corporate and business owners were making large profits off of them. Herbert Spencer used the idea of social Darwinism to explain that the most successful in the society survived, while the poor and working class struggled to survive. Business strategies like horizontal and vertical integration would help business owners dominate profits over other competing businesses. One of the most successful bankers and business owners during the Gilded Age was J.P. Morgan. He was born on April 17, 1837, in Hartford, Connecticut, into a wealthy New England family. His relatives James Pierpont founded Yale University, his grandfather founded the Aetna Insurance Company, and his father was an owner of a dry goods company. He graduated high school in 1854 and went to Europe to study French and German. Then he moved back to New York to finally start his financial career in 1857. Throughout his career, J.P. Morgan has reorganized many major corporations and financed in railroad companies. He has also helped the United States in different economic recessions. By incorporating philosophies of the Gilded Age, such as anti-competitive strategies, known as Morganization, that relied on laissez-faire economics and revolutionary or crucial investments, J.P. Morgan successfully gained great levels of wealth and influence. Wise investments, the rapid growth of economy, and his business tactics contributed to J.P. Morgan's rise to power. J.P. Morgan Chase & Company is one of the world's oldest, largest, and best-known financial institutions. J.P. Morgan & Co. was founded in New York in 1871. Before the company came about being named J.P. Morgan Chase, it used to be called Drexel Morgan & Co., which was founded by J.P. Morgan himself and Philadelphia banker Anthony Drexel. Morgan initially served as an agent for Europeans investing in the United States, which established itself as the nation's preeminent private domestic and foreign bank. American banks were very important to the nation's economic and industrial growth by lending money, safeguarding deposits, and issuing banknotes. J.P. Morgan Chase is linked to many of the early banks such as the Western Reserve Bank, one of the first banks in Ohio, Second State Bank of Indiana, and Springfield Marine and Fire Insurance Company. All three of these banks eventually merged with J.P. Morgan Chase in 2004. The Morgan firm was working together with the railroad industry. In 1879, Morgan took a leap in investing in railroads with William Vanderbilt and bought 250,000 shares of stock in the New York Central Railroad, securing himself a seat on the board of directors. He fronted a group that sold $40 million in bonds to finance Northern Pacific Railroad. In 1885, Morgan made the Corsair Compact between two major East Coast Railroad competitors, the New York Central, owned by Vanderbilt, and Pennsylvania Railroads. J.P. Morgan threatened the companies of the disastrous economic consequences of fighting and had them sign a truce. J.P. Morgan would use his reputation to lure European financiers into America. In 1892, Morgan invested in General Electric. Morgan believed that his investments helped better the country's people and economy, in justification of his enormous wealth. J.P. Morgan's businesses played a big part in his success and the accumulation of his influences. Due to laissez-faire economics of the time, J.P. Morgan's huge businesses were able to utilize what is known as Morganization, the process where he eliminated competition in the specific industries he was investing in. Morgan would buy smaller firms, then combine them into a huge monopoly, with him as a board of director. Morgan did this first in railroads, then steel, electricity, and the banking industry. Through monopolies, Morgan was able to control rates and maximize his profits. He used his power and wealth to almost single-handedly save the economy during the Panic of 1893, when gold reserves drastically depleted. Morgan formed a syndicate, international bonds that would supply gold in exchange for good rates on 30-year bonds. He also stabilized the economy in 1895, the same year that Drexel died. Then Morgan financed Federal Steel in 1898, another product imperative to American business. One of his most famous investments is when he purchased Carnegie Steel for $500 million, then formed U.S. Steel, a major company even today. At the end of J.P. Morgan's career, he had power for approximately 1/6 of the railroad tracks in the United States. His company's influence and power extended even beyond his death, as his company JP Morgan & Co. helped to finance the Panama Canal by raising $40 million for the U.S. government to buy land rights from the French Panama Canal Company. Thanks to Morgan's strategies during his lifetime, his company was able to successfully endure in the future as one of the leading banking companies in the country. JP Morgan helped restore the U.S. economy from a terrible crisis called the Panic of 1907 by using his own wealth and influences to buy bonds in other companies. The Panic of 1907 was a devastating financial crisis that the United States economy struggled with. The crisis started when the American money supply was overwhelmed with aiding reconstruction to San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake and the Hepburn Act decreasing values of railroads. The economy worsened when the copper market collapsed by manipulation and when the Standard Oil Company was fined $29 million for violating the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. Despite the $25 million deposit and JP Morgan's $10 million commitment to the New York Bank, the crisis was still not over. JP Morgan prevented another stock market crash by persuading Roosevelt to allow U.S. Steel to buy Tennessee Coal, Iron, and Railway Company. This completely violated the Sherman Antitrust Act, but JP Morgan got off the hook because it was for a good cause. JP Morgan also bought $30 million of bonds, which prevented New York City from declaring bankruptcy at the time. After the Panic of 1907, there was a long period of economic contraction, and JP Morgan pushed to reform the United States financial system. JP Morgan's leadership during the crisis was legalized and protected with the Aldrich-Vreeland Act, and it also helped with the investigation of the panic. A Federal Reserve Act was also passed by Congress on December 23, 1913, to establish Federal Reserve banks and notes for the prevention of another crisis like this one. JP Morgan successfully gained good influence and leadership by the American people for saving the U.S. economy in the Panic of 1907. JP Morgan believed in the importance of character, which he believed allowed him to successfully make wise investments and further amass his wealth. JP Morgan openly disliked the media and public appearances, believing business should be done behind closed doors. In an interview regarding his involvement in the Panic of 1913, Commission Attorney Pujo questions an impatient Morgan.
Are commercial credits based upon the possession of money or property?
No, sir. The first thing is character.
Before money or property?
Before money or anything else. Money cannot buy character.
So that a man with character, without anything at all behind it, can get all the credit he wants, and a man with the property cannot get it?
This is very much so the case.
But that is the rule of business?
That is the rule of business, sir.
If that is the rule of business, Mr. Morgan, why do the banks demand, the first thing they ask, a statement of what the man has got before they extend him credit?
This is a question in which they all go into, but the first thing they always ask, they want to see your record.
Yes, and if his record is a blank, then the next thing is how much has he got?
People do not care then.
For instance, if he has got government bonds or railroad bonds and goes in to get credit and he gets it on the security of those bonds, does he not?
Yes.
He does not get it on the face of his character, does he?
Yes, he does get it on the face of his character.
I see. Then he might as well take the bonds home, had he not?
Because a man I do not trust could not get money from me in all the bonds of Christendom.
While JP Morgan was seen heroic by Wall Street tycoons, critics accused Morgan of hypocrisy and having such unfair enormous wealth as being able to afford experimenting in characters without the worry of losses. On March 31, 1913, at the age of 76, JP Morgan died in his hotel room in Rome. His health had been steadily declining as he died in his sleep, leaving behind an entirely transformed American financial industry, according to Professor Torres from the University of Columbia.
The New York Times described Morgan as one of the arduous tale and great responsibility. When Morgan died, he was respected so well by the American people that the New York Stock Exchange closed until noon that day. Now think about that. It was a huge deal and an event that rarely occurs. Morgan single-handedly saved the United States from economic failure in 1907 by holding a meeting that stabilized U.S. trust banks. Besides saving an entire country, Morgan's name lives on in his massive businesses Morgan Chase & Company and the Morgan Stanley Company.
With over 100,000 employees combined, both of these businesses still greatly affect the U.S. economy today. However, much of the general public saw Morgan as a money-hungry tycoon. Loved by the government and upper class, and despised by the lower class, Morgan still thrived. While JP Morgan was sick, the New York Times published an article titled "The Illness of Mr. Morgan," and reads, Morgan has been the most massive and conspicuous figure in the world of finance for a generation. In that field, he has been the greatest figure of the past and the present century, and in the comparison we include Europe as well as America. His services to this country in times of stress and peril have been heroic and of priceless value.
When you expect things to happen, strangely enough, they do happen.